All right. So, um, have you ever been out somewhere and you really need your phone
Oh, yeah,
and the battery dies?
totally.
Yeah, and it's like your lifeline to the world cuts out.
Yeah, you feel so disconnected.
Yeah. It's like we're plugged into these invisible systems all the time, infrastructures, and we kind of forget about them until something goes wrong.
Right. It's like we're so used to things just working
Yeah.
that we don't realize how much we rely on them.
And we're not just talking about roads and bridges here, although those are pretty important too.
No, definitely not. We're talking about the systems that manage our healthcare data, like
Hmm.
how we access information, even our identities. It's a whole other world, really.
A hidden world. And that's what we're diving into today with our guests Laura Forlano and Ranjit Singh.
Laura is a social scientist and design researcher. She's like a tech detective, really getting into the human side of technology.
I like that, a tech detective.
She's got this fascinating work on what she calls intimate infrastructures, especially focusing on medical devices.
Okay, intimate infrastructures. That sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. What does that even mean?
Well, she uses this term to explain how technology, even something as seemingly impersonal as a medical device, can become a really deep part of our lives.
Right. I mean, we think of infrastructure as these big external things, but this is getting at something much more personal.
Exactly. And Laura actually uses her own experience as an example. She relies on an automated insulin pump to manage her diabetes.
So, literally a life-saving piece of technology, but I'm guessing it's not as simple as just strapping it on and forgetting about it.
Definitely not. She talks about this constant labor involved, always having to be aware of it, managing it, even being woken up in the middle of the night by it, like a sensor going off.
Wow, I can only imagine. Woken up like a sensor. That's intense. So it's not just about the device itself, it's the whole relationship you have with it, how it shapes your life.
And how it even becomes part of your identity in a way. And this is something that Ranjit Singh, our other guest, explores in his work too, but in a different context.
Oh, how so?
Well, Ranjit studies digital ID systems, primarily in India. And his research is all about how these systems are changing what it means to be a citizen in this digital age.
That's a huge question. What does it even mean to be a citizen online? It makes you think about all the systems we interact with every day that are shaping our lives in ways we might not even realize.
Absolutely.
It's like we're plugged into this invisible grid powered by ones and zeros,
Yeah.
and it's easy to forget it's even there until your phone dies.
Right. Until something breaks down and then you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting, I think, especially with Ranjit's research on digital ID systems,
Definitely. It's a really timely topic.
because it's about more than just, verifying your identity online for something.
Right.
This gets into some pretty deep questions about what it even means to be a citizen now
Absolutely. I mean, think about
in
it.
a digital world.
Yeah, like what proves you are who you say you are when so much of our lives happen online?
Exactly. And Ranjit's work in India shows how complicated this gets in the real world.
Oh, yeah. It's not just theory.
Because these systems, which are often presented as solutions
Right, like a way to make things more efficient.
to streamline services, reduce fraud.
Yeah, all of that. But then the reality is much more,
Messy.
well, messy, yeah,
Yeah.
and complex.
So give me an example. What's something Ranjit talks about that really brings this home?
Well, he talks about how in some cases, people need to provide proof of residency, like their address.
Which makes sense on the surface, right? To access certain government programs.
Right, you want to make sure the aid's going to the right people, but
But then how do you prove where you live?
exactly, that's the catch-22.
Yeah.
What if you don't have traditional forms of ID or you've been displaced?
Or you're living somewhere temporarily.
Exactly. You're kind of stuck.
So you're shut out of the system that's supposed to be helping you.
Right, it's a huge problem. And it highlights how these systems, even if they're designed with the best intentions,
Right, even if they're data-driven, which is supposed to be neutral.
right, exactly, they can actually reinforce existing inequalities rather than solve them.
It's like building a bridge to opportunity, but then, not everyone got the memo about where the bridge is.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just an issue in India either.
Right, this is relevant everywhere. It makes you think about the assumptions baked into all the technologies we use every day. Like, who gets to decide who benefits and who doesn't?
It's about power, ultimately.
Yeah.
Who has it, who designs these systems, and whose needs are they really serving?
It's like those terms and conditions we all scroll through without reading.
Oh, totally.
We just click agree, but we don't really know what we're agreeing to.
Yeah, and even if we did read them, we probably wouldn't have much choice in the matter.
Exactly. And this takes us back to Laura's experience with her insulin pump.
Oh, right, because that's about a very personal relationship with technology.
Right. Even something that's meant to be life-saving can come with its own set of
For
challenges.
sure. Trade-offs, unintended consequences, and those small acts of disobedience she talks about.
Right. We'll have to get into those. So we've talked about these small acts of disobedience that Laura mentions,
Right.
but what do those actually look like in practice? I mean, it's not like she's like hacking into her insulin pump or something.
Uh-huh. No, not quite. Although I'm sure there are people out there doing that.
Right. People hacking their medical devices.
But in Laura's case, it's more about those moments where she might override the default settings,
Okay, interesting.
like adjusting the dosage or the timing of her insulin based on, how she's feeling, what she's eating, all those factors.
So it's about using her own knowledge of her body.
Exactly. She's not just blindly following what the technology tells her to do. She's taking control.
It's like she's having a conversation with the device almost.
Yeah. And pushing back when it's not quite right for her.
Which is something we probably all do with technology to some extent.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
We find workarounds. We figure out how to make things work for us.
Like when your grandma puts a sticker over the webcam on her laptop.
Exactly. It's like, I know you're there, technology, but I'm still in charge here.
Haha, exactly. But in Laura's case, it's not just about like personal preference.
Right.
It's about her health, her well-being.
Absolutely. It's about reclaiming agency in a situation where it feels like a lot of control has been given over to a machine.
And the interesting thing is those small acts can have a ripple effect.
Oh, definitely.
Because when people share their workarounds, their hacks.
Right. It becomes this collective knowledge.
Exactly. It can lead to bigger changes.
Like maybe the designers of the technology will take notice and be like, huh, maybe we need to rethink this feature.
It's like, remember when people used to jailbreak their iPhone
Oh,
to
yeah.
do things that Apple didn't officially support?
And then eventually Apple would just incorporate those features into their software.
Right. Because they realized, oh, people actually want this. So it's about pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely. And I think that's where Ranjit's work and Laura's work really connect.
Oh, how
Well, Ranjit talks about this constant tension between competing values when you're designing any kind of large-scale system.
right, like trying to find the balance.
Exactly. Like transparency versus privacy, for
Yeah.
example.
Right, because you want people to know how their data is being used.
But you also want to protect their privacy.
Exactly. Or like access versus control. Like you want to make sure everyone has access to these digital systems.
Right. But then who gets to control them? And how do we prevent misuse?
It's a tricky balance. So how do we even begin to navigate all of this?
Well, both Laura and Ranjit would say it's about having these conversations.
Okay, so more dialogue.
Yes. And not just among tech people. Bringing in diverse voices, especially those who are most impacted by these technologies.
So like in the case of digital ID systems, talking to people in marginalized communities.
Exactly. Or people with disabilities who might interact with technology differently.
Because they're the ones who are really going to feel the effects of these systems.
Exactly. Both the good and the bad.
So it's about making sure everyone has a seat at the table when these technologies are being designed.
Absolutely. And remembering that it's an ongoing process. These systems are constantly evolving, so we need to be having these conversations all the time.
It's like we can't just create these systems and then walk away.
Right. We have to keep questioning them, refining them, making sure they're serving everyone.
Because technology is powerful.
Incredibly powerful.
And it's up to us to shape how that power is used.
Absolutely. It's not some inevitable force. We have agency here.
That's a great point to end on, I think. So, listeners, we'll leave you with that thought. What are the invisible systems shaping your world? And how can you help make them more just and equitable for everyone? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having us.